Ignition begins in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, this is Doug Wilson. I'm the President and CEO of the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore. We'd like you to welcome you to another edition of the Community Foundation Spotlight here on PAC 14. And with me today we have our special guest, Bob Cook. Mr. Cook has been in the Salisbury area for years, and he's a businessman and local community activist and is responsible for a lot of stuff, which I'm sure we'll be able to hear a little bit about this morning. But we're happy that he is here. And the reason he's here is because this year, and in fact on May 17th at the Fountains in Salisbury, the Community Foundation will be celebrating its 30th year and really success in serving the communities and helping out a lot of nonprofits. But the big thing is here, this guy was here at the very beginning. In fact, started basically the Community Foundation. So Bob, thanks for being with us this morning. And I guess, why don't you just tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, some background, and how you became involved to start the Community Foundation.
Well, Doug, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be here. This is a real honor and pleasure. And the way I got here was really quite roundabout. But I came here to Salisbury because I was invited by a group of business leaders, CEOs, to come here and start the Greater Salisbury Committee. And as you know, because you're a part of it, our mission of Greater Salisbury was to identify community problems and work with others to solve those problems. But so I came here in 1967. Prior to that, well, going back a little ways, well, I'm a Depression era child and a teenage. I grew up during the 30s and was in the 1940s. I was old enough in 1943 to go in the service at 17 as an aviation cadet, but the aviation cadet program wasn't moving fast enough for me. We were waiting, so I resigned as a cadet and applied to go to infantry officer candidate school. And what a change that was, I tell you. That was an infantry officer candidate school. It was like going from heaven to the other place in many ways. But anyway, so I had a I was a second lieutenant at age 19. I went to Europe, was a company commander, and the general picked me out to be his aide-de-camp, so I had a very interesting experience in Europe, mostly occupation. I got there at the end of World War II, stayed for several years in the occupation. And because I was something of a skier, I actually organized and ran the Army ski team there. And my duties weren't all really tough, although I had my share of difficult times. So anyway, I came back. I went to college, was recalled as a captain in the Korean War. By now I made it a career. But my career was cut off when I was in Korea a little later, and I was retired earlier than normal because of a severe disability. But I was okay, so I went back to the University of Tennessee, where I had been the professor of military science. Did graduate work there. I'm an ABD, all but dissertation. Came up to the University of Delaware, where I was part of the Urban Affairs Department, and then started my own department, Technical and Business Services. I did a lot of research on the Delmarva Peninsula, so this group of business leaders, wonderful Salisbury community, such great leadership then, wanted to start the Greater Salisbury Committee. It was kind of modeled after Baltimore's, which was really an outstanding organization. And so they brought me here, and I started it on a shoestring, and that brings us to the Community Foundation. The way we worked then was that I would identify something that needed doing, and you know, Warwick Community College is one of the products, and the Delmarva Water Transport Committee and the Economic, those are all Greater Salisbury projects. But to get to the Community Foundation directly, there's an organization, it's the Aspen Institute now up at Y, but back then it was called the Y Institute. And a gentleman, really great guy, by the name of Jim Nelson, was a director of that. This was all funded by the Houghton family, who had very, very wealthy. But Jim Nelson was the executive director, and we worked together because we had common interests in education and various other things. So Jim called me one day and said, Bob, I'm hosting here at I'm hosting the National Council of Community Foundations. You might be interested. That might be something that you could do. So at Jim's, at his expense, and for a couple of days I went up to the Y Institute and enjoyed learning about that. And I brought it back. I didn't completely understand it at that time, but I studied it. I brought it back in a way, then I presented it to the Greater Salisbury Committee. Well, eventually they appointed, they didn't, we had a lot of difficulties understanding the concept back then. It was a new concept here. There weren't any here. So anyway, we did appoint a community foundation committee, and while we're celebrating the 30th anniversary here, actually Greater Salisbury, and I have this, the minutes of a meeting on December 7th, 1981. Some great people were on this committee, and eventually the outcome of it was that this committee helped develop it. We brought in people to explain it better, consultants, and I had a half a dozen different people come in and talk to us, I guess. But in any event, we then did a survey of the Greater Salisbury Committee to see how many members, and there were about 50 members then, would support it. And this survey basically said, how much would you give in the initial funding? And mostly it was the $10,000, $25,000 range. But then I was counting these questionnaires and came to Dick Henson's, and it went from 25,000 to the last one up to $1 million.
Right.
Dick Henson wrote down $1 million, and that was really the catalyst that got us started. So that's the way we got started, through the Greater Salisbury Committee as a result of the Y Institute introducing it to us, and the rest is history.
As we say. Yes, and you kind of took over the reins and ran the thing for a while, didn't you?
Well, that's true.
Until you found somebody.
Yes, that's true. That was a kind of a process in Greater Salisbury. When we started some new organization, until we would get, and this was true, I wasn't ever the president of Warwick, but I was the secretary treasurer, and I ran the Delmarva Water Transport Committee for quite a while till we got a staff person, so forth. So it was a precedent. So they decided that until we could do something more, I would be the acting or the director of the Community Foundation in addition to Greater Salisbury Committee.
Right.
This was the procedure.
Yeah.
But eventually, not too long afterwards, we hired then Linda Wooten, who is now Linda Hutchison, and Linda, great gal, great lady, sort of took over the running of it for a while.
And there have been several CEOs in and out, and I've just recently taken over for Dr. Spicer Bell, who's now in retirement, enjoying himself, hopefully on some island someplace. In any event, we are celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. What does that mean to you?
Well, you know, Doug, first of all, congratulations on your taking. We've been friends a long time.
Yes, you and I know each other for 30 years.
Long before you became the president of the Community Foundation, we worked together on other projects, and that's been a joy for me to work with you. But what does it mean to me? Well, it's just, we take something from an idea, and it was hard, people didn't understand it in the initial, so we had to really educate people and then get commitments. And so it went from an idea in the early 1980s to now, under your leadership, we have assets, and I say we because I've been associated with it, assets of over $100 million.
That's right.
In Salisbury, Maryland, in this region, $100 million. That is incredible. Great success story.
Right.
And it's just thrilling to think. And Community Foundation makes gifts and grants of, I think, $6 million a year now, something like that.
Close up to that. Do you know, when we had, the Community Foundation now serves a defined geographic area, Wicomico, Worcester, and Somerset County, down here on the lower shore. But initially, I think I recall you telling me, in fact, when I've looked at the Articles of Incorporation, it wasn't that broad a service area. Well, What happened? Why? What did we do? What did we do?
Well, first of all, the committee was the Greater Salisbury Committee, but that's really, even though it says Greater Salisbury, it's always been a regional organization.
Right.
But these original founders that I mentioned to you before, well, Oscar Carey was the chairman of that, his Larmer Corporation. He died a few years ago, but what a committed guy he was. But we had Dick Wooten, another leader, and Dick Bernstein, who was, and of course, Dick Henson was on this committee, and Dick Hazel from the Hazel. So we had Frank Moore. We had just wonderful people on this group. But anyway, we also had on this committee A.T. Blades, Preston Trucking, and A.T. is from Caroline County, so that gave us a sense that it needed to be regional for a lot of reasons. One, our base was too small, population-wise, just using the Salisbury area, and the other counties around us also needed it. So we went from everything to the whole Eastern Shore to just Salisbury, and eventually, with a lot of research, decided on the three-county area. And incidentally, it took time to bring the other two counties along, but now, as you know, better than I do, the other counties are very involved. Somerset and Worcester are very involved, as well as Wycomico.
Right. You know, talk to me a minute about the Purdue Kresge Foundation. Did a lot of things, and for not only the Community Foundation, but also was really a blasting off point, if you will, for many of our nonprofits who really got their start and really got a leg up with the funding that came from that project. Can you give us a little on that?
Well, I was very involved in that. I had been on the I'd been on the board of trustees of the Community Foundation for several years at that point in time, and actually Emily Robinson was our director now. She and several others, they went to a meeting and heard about this Kresge matching grant, and came back, and the board got quite enthused about it, but it was quite a process to get. We were competing against much larger community foundation. It was funding. The Kresge Foundation was going to give a matching fund, $5 million, eventually $5 million. I said, was it $5? And but it had to be matched. So, and there were all these steps. So the board of trustees had to raise among themselves $250,000 to just get into the process. Then we had to raise another $1 million, and eventually we got to the point where we were able to match the Kresge, but then Frank Purdue and Mitzi came in and worked with, and Marty Need and I were co-chairs or worked together to work through this, to develop this Purdue Kresge event. But anyway, so the upshot of it was Frank and Mitzi Purdue came in and they matched what we already had.
Right.
So what we already had from the Kresge Foundation. So ultimately it was $12 million that was raised at one, and that really was a huge, that got us over the takeoff where we really started. That's when things started to really happen big, when we got, I guess that put the whole foundation up in the 20 million, something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a huge thing. And as you say, I just had breakfast with Joe Ollinger a couple days ago, and he, as you say, all these other nonprofits joined in, and they had to raise a certain amount of money to be a part of it. There were 20 of them, roughly, 22 maybe, but Lower Shore Enterprises, Joe Ollinger was on their board, and they were challenged, and they raised $400,000, which was a substantial sum. But Joe told me just 2 or 3 days ago that $400,000, which was part of the original Kresge Purdue money, that has now grown to $1 million, which is just indicates what the tremendous things that have happened in this community.
You're exactly right. You know, and that has been a great focal point for us. It kind of put us on the map. And the other thing I think I'll add, and I'm not going to get this number exactly right, but there were only just a handful of community foundations. I mean, less than 10, maybe as few as 6. That number sticks in my mind for some reason.
Right.
But there were only 6 community foundations that actually received funding from Kresge. So that shows you the kind of time and effort and dedication that these people from the original board of directors from the Community Foundation put into this effort, and I think that that's terrific.
6 is the right number.
Six is the right number, okay.
And the Kresge consultant that came here to talk to us was very pessimistic because we were so much smaller. We were much smaller than, in terms of our size of our community, the amount of money, that they were pessimistic. They were not optimistic about it. But we came out really in the very upper levels because of our commitment, our fundraising, our leadership. This Salisbury is just a wonderful, generous, caring community with great leadership.
It is. I want to break for just a second and welcome those of you who just may tuned in to the Community Foundation Spotlight here on PAC 14. And with me today is the great and wonderful Bob Cook, who civic leader and former director of the Greater Salisbury Committee, and God knows how many other types of organizations he's led or at least started through that. And we're here today talking about the fact that on May 17th, the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore, your community foundation, will be celebrating 30 years of existence. And we've made terrific growth and progress over that time, thanks to a lot of people, Bob being one of the main ones, because it was through his efforts in the Greater Salisbury Committee that the Community Foundation actually came into being. So, Bob, let's talk a little bit about the kinds of we have a lot of nonprofit organizations on the shores, over 300 of them. And we spend a lot of time working with a lot of those foundations, not foundations, but organizations, typically not-for-profits. And I know that you've been involved in some of that activity, and we give away money in the form of grants from our different granting authorities that we have, committees that we have at the foundation. And I think we very much appreciate the time and effort involved in those nonprofit boards. And you sit on, I don't know how many nonprofit boards over the time you've been here, but I know you're on some now as well. And can you just talk a little bit about how the Community Foundation interfaces with those nonprofit organizations and helps them out?
Well, I certainly can. Doug, you're right. I have, my whole career has been in the nonprofit sector.
Right.
Starting with the Army, that's definitely a nonprofit career. And of course, Greater Salisbury was a nonprofit organization. It's because of its mission is to help the community in many ways. But the way that the Community Foundation does work, not just with other organizations, but with individuals as well. But Lower Shore Enterprises is one. It used to be Lower Shore Sheltered Workshop.
Right.
I've been involved with that since it was started about the same time I came here, and one way or the other I've been involved with it. So just using it as an example, over the years they have come to the Community Foundation for grants for many different things. There's as you know better than I, there's a specific process where nonprofit organizations can ask, and literally, as you say, you've made grants and loans and all kinds of different ways to give money and help these very much Lower Shore. In addition to getting grants over the years, as have many other organizations, they became one of the, I just saw my notes, it was 19 instead of 20 that eventually became part of this Purdue Kresge. Right. So that's one way that they do, but there's another very, very significant way that Community Foundation works that I happen to be a part of because I have not very much, but I have a small, and we call it a donor advised fund, and that makes, I guess you've got over 200 of those now. That's where an individual or a family or even a business can put funds, make a gift of those funds to the Community Foundation, and the Community Foundation, they then own those funds, but this donor advisor, whoever it might be, they can recommend to the Community Foundation how they would like the gifts to be made. It's a great process. And so many people, I just talked to Don Mabe last week. He's retired as chairman of the Purdue Farms. But I talked to him last week. He's in South Carolina now, but he told me, boy, he said that one of the best things I ever did. He said it's really great what the Community Foundation has done for our philanthropic.
Right.
So, and that's the same story you hear all over. It's just such a wonderful organization, and it enables people who want to be generous to make their gifts in a very orderly way, and it's administered for them. They don't have to worry about it, and it's the same organization can make and administer these many grants, gifts and grants
Right.
over a period.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things, attributes about the Community Foundation that not a lot of people know about, but our nonprofit partners and other nonprofit organizations know about, is that we provide a lot of education and training. We have workshops that help them do some capacity building, help them with how to understand a financial statement, how to fill out a 990, those kinds of things. The operations and management components of managing a not-for-profit, we provide those as well. We also have this huge, and you well know, this huge organization just set up to take care of volunteers. We have a volunteer network. We have a volunteer center where if organizations need volunteers, they can contact us. In fact, Heather Towers runs it at the foundation, and she's also our program officer. But so she's responsible for coordinating all of those things. So not only do we just give money away, right? But we also provide services and provide training and education, and we work with attorneys. We work with other kinds of investment advisors in the area. So we work closely with them to assist them for their clients that want to leave a legacy in our area, that we can manage those funds. I got a quick little something to tell you. You don't know this, but the financial performance of the foundation has been really, really top notch, and we've, for the 5, 7, and 10-year comparisons that the Council on Foundations, which was the one that first you spoke
Right.
with about this, they provide comparisons for our performance, our fund performance, with foundations our size, but also the entire breadth of the community foundations in the United States. And we're ranked number 1 in for foundations our size in terms of performance. Well, interestingly enough, yesterday I spoke with a gal from the Community Foundation of New Jersey. And her investment committee told her, that she was the CFO, that, you know what, we need to find the best performers in the Council on Foundations database in terms of financial performance, and talk to them and find out what they're doing. Guess who they sent them to?
Well, I can
They
guess.
sent them to us. That's
you.
right. And we spoke to her, and it was just great doing that. And of course, there were others that she spoke with, but you know what she told us? She said, of all the ones she's spoken to, all the community foundations she spoke to, we performed the best. So we're their top performer in their thing. So I thought that was great. It was a real kudos to our organization, our board certainly, and our investment committee, and also our investment manager. But anyway, that being said, let's get to the final line here, and that is that we're having this big 30th anniversary celebration.
Before you do that, Doug,
Oh yeah, how about it?
Can I just say that for many years, Community Foundation was housed with the Greater Salisbury Committee
Yes, it was.
downtown.
Right.
And eventually, and I think it was during Spicer Bell's, your immediate predecessor, the board decided they needed more space, and they really did.
Right.
And so they built a building out on Route 50, and Route 50 East. It's where you can see it right from the highway.
That's beautiful.
But not only does it house your offices, the offices of the foundation, but you built a wing where nonprofits can get subsidized or very low cost rent, so that they kind of an incubator for nonprofits, I guess you could call it.
That's right. We have a number of them in there.
So it's that's a wonderful thing too. And I guess the name of your volunteer organization is Sure Can, isn't it?
Well,
what
it
is the
used to
name?
be Sure Can.
Oh.
Do you remember Salisbury University used to house it? Used to
Yes.
have it. And so
I remember.
we took it over from them. And yes, it still sure can, but because we didn't want to lose some of that connectivity to people who knew it as that. But it's really our volunteer center now. And as I say, Heather runs it, and it's just a terrific group. And they're getting busier and busier. And they hold events all the time. In fact, I think, and I wish I knew the date, but I think it's in June, there's a big event she's putting on in cooperation with the United Way. It's going to be over at Warwick. It's going to be about volunteer services and things like that. So that's going to be a big event. And we're just pleased to be able to work with the United Way on that. But anyway, let me get, in the few minutes we have remaining, Bob, I want to talk about the big celebration we're going to have in May, on May 17th. And that is going to be at the Fountains. And there's going to be a live band. There's great food. We're going to be dining. And we're going to be doing something very interesting at that event through our sponsors. And we're going to be having some recognition there. And it's kind of a surprise deal. It's we're not talking about it too much, but it's very consistent with what the foundation does. And so we're really looking forward to be able to do that. We think it's going to be a great event. Of course, you're only 30 years old once. You know, you can only celebrate the 30th anniversary once. And it's going to be a while before we celebrate another one. So we're really looking forward to it. And if people want to get involved, they can phone the foundation at 410-742-9911, or they can go at cfes.org. If you want to find out some more information or to get tickets, I can tell you this thing's going to fill up fast. And we're about to send out invitations to everybody, so it's going to be a great event. And I know you'll be there.
I certainly, good Lord willing, I certainly will.
Yeah, because I think that's lovely. We're going to try and get some of the older people who were around, and maybe the executive directors and those back, you know, to say hi and everything. So anyway.
Wonderful.
For last comments, anything you want to tell our viewers or ask or say or what?
Well, as you've been talking, Doug, I've just been thinking about 30 years from an idea. Well, actually, I'm a little beyond the 30 years. I'm 34 years.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Because of our original effort.
Right.
But I'm
planning
just thinking, if we went from an idea to $100 million in assets in the first 30 years and give $6 million away to fulfill needs in this community, I just am trying to visualize what the next 30th anniversary, the 60th anniversary will be.
I know.
If it keeps going the way it was, it'll be an enormous, unbelievable benefit to this whole region. And I like to look to the future optimistically. That's why I do what I do.
Yeah. You're a good man, Bob Cook. Yeah, and you can't leave us for at least another 40 years. Thank you so much for being here. We love you. Be good. All right, thank you for tuning in today, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much.
Would you like to see your community organization or nonprofit group featured on PAC 14? To get started, contact us at 410-677-5014 or visit our website at www.pac14.org. PAC 14 is a great way to connect with your community.